This is the story of a mother whose son broke her heart with words so cruel they would change both their lives forever. Eleanor's response to her son's betrayal was so shocking that everyone who heard it was left speechless. I promise you don't want to miss this incredible journey of sacrifice, heartbreak, and ultimate redemption that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. So settle in, because this story will stay with you long after the final word. And if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and give this story a thumbs up if it moves you. Eleanor was 62 years old and lived in a cozy 2-bedroom house in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The house always smelled of fresh-baked butter tarts and the pine cleaner she used to keep everything spotless. Eleanor was a woman of simple means but infinite love, and every ounce of that love was devoted to her son, Marcus. When Marcus was just 8 years old, Eleanor's husband was killed in a tragic accident at the construction site where he worked. The insurance settlement was modest, and Eleanor knew she would have to work twice as hard to give Marcus the life his father would have wanted for him. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., Eleanor would wake up in the darkness of the Canadian winter. She would bundle up in her worn winter coat and trudge through the snow to catch the first bus downtown. Her first job was cleaning office buildings in the financial district. She would scrub floors, empty trash bins, and polish windows until her fingers were raw from the harsh cleaning chemicals. In the afternoons, she worked as a cashier at the local Sobeys grocery store. She would stand for 8 hours straight, scanning groceries and smiling at customers, even when her feet were swollen and her back ached. On weekends, she took on a third job, sewing alterations for a local tailor shop, working by lamplight late into the night. Eleanor's hands told the story of her sacrifice. They were weathered and scarred from years of hard labor. Her face showed the weight of her struggles, two deep lines around her eyes from squinting in the early morning cold, and a prominent scar that ran from her left temple down to her cheek. That scar held a story that Marcus had long forgotten. When he was 10 years old, their old house had caught fire during a brutal Manitoba blizzard. The furnace had malfunctioned, sending flames racing through their small home. Eleanor had thrown herself over Marcus, shielding him from falling debris as they escaped. A piece of burning ceiling beam had struck her face, leaving her permanently marked. But Marcus was safe, and that was all that mattered to her. Every dollar Eleanor earned went toward Marcus's future. She sent him to the best schools she could afford. When he wanted to play hockey, she worked extra shifts to buy him proper equipment. When he dreamed of going to university, she took out loans and worked overtime to make it happen. She never bought herself new clothes, never went out with friends, never took a vacation. Marcus was her world. Marcus grew up to be everything Eleanor had hoped for. He was tall, handsome, and intelligent. He graduated from the University of Toronto with a business degree and landed a high-paying job at a prestigious consulting firm in Toronto. He wore expensive suits, drove a luxury car, and lived in a downtown condo with a view of Lake Ontario. Eleanor was incredibly proud of him. When he would visit her in Winnipeg, she would cook all his favorite foods, tourtière, maple-glazed salmon, and her famous butter tarts. They would sit in her small kitchen, and he would tell her about his work while she listened with eyes full of pride. One crisp October afternoon, Marcus came home to Winnipeg for a visit. But this time, he wasn't alone. He brought with him a stunning young woman named Scarlett. Scarlett was everything Eleanor wasn't: young, polished, and wealthy. She wore designer clothes and carried a purse that cost more than Eleanor made in a month. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels across Canada. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice filled with excitement, "this is Scarlett, my fiancée. We're getting married." Eleanor's heart soared with joy. Her son was getting married. This was the moment she had dreamed of for years. Tears of happiness filled her eyes as she rushed forward to embrace Marcus, then turned to welcome Scarlett with open arms. "Welcome to the family, dear," Eleanor said warmly, her voice thick with emotion. Scarlett's smile was thin and cold. She allowed Eleanor a brief, stiff hug before stepping back, her eyes scanning the modest home with barely concealed disdain. Eleanor didn't notice. She was too overjoyed. "Oh, we must celebrate. I'll make tea and I have fresh butter tarts in the kitchen." As they sat in the living room, Eleanor couldn't contain her excitement. She asked about their plans, the venue, and the date. She was already imagining herself in her best dress, the burgundy one she had saved for special occasions, sitting in the front row watching her son get married. "It's going to be a very elegant affair," Marcus said, glancing nervously at Scarlett. "Scarlett's family is hosting it at their hotel in Toronto. It'll be quite grand." "Oh, how wonderful!" Eleanor beamed. "I can't wait to meet her family and celebrate with you both." That's when the atmosphere in the room shifted. Marcus and Scarlett exchanged a look that Eleanor didn't understand. The joy began to drain from the room like air from a punctured balloon. "Mom," Marcus began, his voice suddenly quieter, more serious. "We need to talk to you about something." "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" Marcus looked down at his hands, unable to meet her eyes. Scarlett, however, looked directly at Eleanor with cold calculation. "The thing is," Scarlett said, her voice sharp and clear, "this wedding is going to be a very high-profile event. There will be important people there, business leaders, politicians, celebrities. Image is everything." Eleanor looked confused. I don't understand. What does that have to do with me?" Marcus finally looked up, and what Eleanor saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. It was shame. But not shame for himself, shame for her. "Mom," he said, the words coming out in a rush, "we don't think it would be appropriate for you to come to the wedding." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. The ticking of the old clock on the mantel suddenly seemed deafeningly loud. "What did you say?" "Look at yourself, Eleanor," Scarlett said, her voice like ice. "Look at your hands, your face, that horrible scar. You'd stick out like a sore thumb among our guests. People would stare. It would be embarrassing for everyone." Marcus couldn't look at his mother. You don't fit in with our world, Mom. The people at this wedding, they're successful, polished. You'd feel out of place." "Out of place?" Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. "At my own son's wedding?" "It's for the best," Scarlett continued mercilessly. "We want everything to be perfect. Your presence would just complicate things." The room fell silent except for the sound of Eleanor's heart breaking. She looked at her son, her baby boy whom she had sacrificed everything for, and saw a stranger. The little boy who used to trace her scar with his finger and call her his hero was gone. In his place sat a man who was ashamed of the very hands that had fed him, the very face that had smiled at him every day of his life. Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't shout. A strange, cold, calm settled over her. She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. "I see," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, emotionless. "I understand." Marcus looked relieved. "Thank you for understanding, Mom. We'll send you lots of photos." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Of course you will." Her voice was flat, empty of all emotion. As Marcus and Scarlett gathered their things to leave, Eleanor remained standing in the center of her living room. They headed toward the door, eager to escape the uncomfortable situation they had created. "We'll call you soon, Mom," Marcus said as he reached for the door handle. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "I'm sure you will." They left without looking back, leaving Eleanor alone in the house that suddenly felt smaller and colder than it ever had before. Eleanor stood alone in her living room for a long time after they left. The half-eaten butter tarts sat on the table like monuments to a celebration that had died. She walked slowly to the mirror hanging on the wall and looked at her reflection. She saw the lines etched by years of hard work. She saw the weathered hands that had worked 3 jobs to pay for Marcus's education. And she saw the scar, the scar that marked the day she had saved her son's life. As she traced that scar with her finger, the memory came flooding back. The smell of smoke, the sound of crackling flames, and the weight of her son's body as she shielded him from the burning debris. She had been willing to die for him that day. And he had just told her she was too ugly to be seen at his wedding. A single tear rolled down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of resolve. Her son wanted a perfect wedding, free of his embarrassing mother. She would give him exactly what he wanted. But he would learn that a mother's love, and a mother's withdrawal of that love, came with consequences he never imagined. The next morning, Eleanor put on her best coat and took the bus downtown to the Bank of Montreal, where she had done her banking for over 30 years. She walked straight to the office of Mr. Harrison, the bank manager who had known her since Marcus was a child. "Eleanor," he said warmly. "What a pleasant surprise. How are you?" "I'm well, Mr. Harrison," she said calmly. "I need to make some changes to my accounts." They sat down at his desk, and Mr. Harrison pulled up her file on his computer. "What can I do for you?" "I have a joint savings account with my son, Marcus," she began. "All the money in that account came from my earnings. I want to close it and transfer all funds to an account in my name only." Mr. Harrison's eyebrows rose. This was the account Eleanor had been funding for years, Marcus's future fund, she had always called it. "Are you certain about this, Eleanor? That's quite a substantial amount." "I'm certain. There's also the credit card linked to your account that Marcus uses. Cancel it immediately. And the automatic payments for his condo rent? Stop them all." Mr. Harrison leaned back in his chair. He had watched Eleanor work herself to the bone for years, always putting every penny toward Marcus's future. The hurt in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. "I'll take care of everything right away, Eleanor." Her next stop was the law office of Mrs. Rebecca Walsh, the lawyer who had helped her draft her will 5 years earlier. "Eleanor, please come in," Mrs. Walsh said, ushering her into the office. "What brings you here today?" "I need to change my will." Mrs. Walsh pulled out Eleanor's file. "Currently, everything goes to Marcus, the house, your savings, your life insurance policy. What changes would you like to make?" "I want to remove Marcus completely. He gets nothing." Mrs. Walsh's pen stopped moving. "Eleanor, this is a very serious decision. May I ask what's happened?" For the first time since the devastating conversation, Eleanor told someone the whole story. She spoke quietly, without emotion, recounting every cruel word. Mrs. Walsh listened in stunned silence. When Eleanor finished, the lawyer removed her glasses and wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. No mother should ever hear those words from her child." "There's something else," Eleanor said softly. She touched the scar on her face. "This scar that he finds so ugly? I saved his life when he was 10 years old. Our house caught fire during a blizzard. I threw myself over him to protect him from falling debris. This scar is the reason he's alive today." Mrs. Walsh was speechless for several moments. Finally, she asked, "What would you like to do with your estate?" "I want everything to go to the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. Let it help children who are truly suffering, and let it help their parents who love them." The new will was drawn up and signed. As Eleanor left the law office, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had done what needed to be done. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood at the altar of the grand ballroom in Scarlett's family hotel in Toronto. He looked magnificent in his designer tuxedo, every inch the successful businessman. Scarlett walked down the aisle in a dress that cost more than most people's cars, looking like a princess from a fairy tale. It was everything they had wanted, elegant, expensive, and perfect. The guest list read like a who's who of Toronto's elite. Everyone was beautiful, successful, and important. Marcus smiled for the cameras, surrounded by his new wealthy in-laws and their influential friends. He didn't think of his mother once. In his mind, He had made the right choice. This was his world now, and she simply didn't belong in it. He had no idea that hundreds of miles away in Winnipeg, his mother was volunteering at a local shelter, serving meals to the homeless with the same hands he had been ashamed of. And he had no idea that his perfect new life was about to come crashing down. The honeymoon was everything money could buy. Marcus and Scarlett flew to the French Riviera, staying in a luxury resort that overlooked the Mediterranean Sea. For 2 weeks, they lived like royalty, dining at the finest restaurants and shopping at the most exclusive boutiques. On their last night, they celebrated at a Michelin-starred restaurant with a 7-course tasting menu. The bill was astronomical, but Marcus didn't care. He was living the high life, and he felt like a king. He confidently handed his credit card to the waiter, the card that had always been backed by his mother's account. The waiter returned with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, sir, but the card has been declined." Marcus's smile faltered. "That's impossible. Try it again." "I've tried it 3 times, sir. It says the account has been closed." The blood drained from Marcus's face. Scarlett stared at him, her perfect smile disappearing. "Do you have another card?" the waiter asked quietly. Marcus fumbled for his debit card, knowing there wasn't enough in his account to cover this meal. It was declined as well. The manager was called. There was a hushed, humiliating conversation. Marcus had to promise to wire the money when he returned to Canada. They left the restaurant in shame, the magic of their honeymoon completely shattered. What was that about? Scarlett demanded once they were back in their hotel room. "It must be a mistake," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'll sort it out tomorrow." But when he called the bank from Toronto, the news was devastating. The credit card had been permanently cancelled by the primary account holder, his mother. The joint savings account had been closed. The automatic rent payments had been stopped. Cancelled? By who? He asked the bank representative, though he already knew the answer. By Eleanor Thompson, sir. She was the primary account holder. When Marcus and Scarlett returned to his condo in Toronto, there was an eviction notice taped to his door. The rent hadn't been paid, and he had 3 days to come up with the money plus late fees or be locked out. Scarlett read the notice, her face growing paler by the second. "Your mother pays your rent?" she asked, her voice dripping with disgust. "The old woman you were too embarrassed to have at our wedding has been funding your entire lifestyle?" Marcus felt like a child caught in a lie. His whole successful image had been built on his mother's sacrifices, and now the foundation had crumbled. "Take me home," Scarlett said coldly. "To my parents' house. I need to think about this marriage." She left him that same day. A week later, her lawyer served him with annulment papers. Their perfect marriage had lasted less than a month. Desperate and humiliated, Marcus drove through the night from Toronto to Winnipeg. He arrived at his mother's house at dawn, exhausted and broken. He pounded on the door until she answered. Eleanor opened the door wearing her simple housecoat, looking completely unsurprised to see him. "What did you do?" he shouted, not even waiting for her to speak. "You destroyed my life. You ruined my marriage. How could you do this to me?" Eleanor looked at him calmly. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I gave you exactly what you wanted, Marcus. You wanted a perfect wedding without your embarrassing mother. You got it. You wanted to be free of the woman whose face disgusted you. You are." "But why?" he cried, his anger collapsing into desperation. "After everything we've been through?" "Everything we've been through," she repeated. "Or everything I've been through for you? You have to fix this," he pleaded. "You have to turn my cards back on, pay my rent, and help me get Scarlett back." "No," she said simply. The word hit him like a physical blow. "You are ashamed of my face, Marcus, but you're not ashamed of my money. You can't have one without the other. This face, these hands that you find so ugly, they earned every dollar that built your life. If you don't want the woman, you can't have her sacrifices either." For the first time, Marcus looked at his mother. He saw the strength in her weathered face, the dignity in her posture. And slowly, the memory of the fire began to return. The months that followed were the hardest of Marcus's life. He lost his condo and had to move into a tiny basement apartment in a rough part of Toronto. His expensive suits were sold to pay for food. His luxury car was repossessed. He had to take a second job washing dishes at a restaurant to make ends meet. His hands, once soft and manicured, became rough and red from the harsh detergents. His back ached constantly from the physical labor. For the first time in his life, he understood what his mother had endured for decades. Every callus on his hands, every ache in his body, was a lesson in the sacrifice she had made for him. One night, after a particularly grueling shift, he found himself thinking about the fire. The memory came back in pieces, the smoke, the fear, the weight of his mother's body protecting him. He remembered tracing her scar with his little finger and telling her she was his hero. How had he become someone who could look at that same scar and call it ugly? Nearly a year after the wedding, Marcus made the drive back to Winnipeg. But this time, he wasn't angry or desperate. He was wearing simple work clothes, and his hands were calloused from honest labor. He had spent months thinking about what he would say, how he could apologize for the unforgivable. He knocked on his mother's door. When she opened it, she barely recognized the man standing before her. Gone was the arrogant, polished businessman. In his place stood someone who looked humbled, tired, but genuine. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I came to apologize. And to tell you that you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known." Eleanor looked at her son, looked at him. She saw the genuine remorse in his eyes, the evidence of hard work in his hands, the man he had become through struggle. "This scar," he continued, touching his face where hers was marked, "it's not ugly. It's beautiful. It's proof of your love. It's the reason I'm alive. I remember now, Mom. I remember how you saved me." He pulled out a small envelope from his pocket. "This isn't much, but it's the beginning. I want to pay you back for everything. Every sacrifice, every dollar, every sleepless night. Even if it takes me the rest of my life." Eleanor didn't take the envelope. Instead, she opened her arms. Marcus fell into his mother's embrace, and for the first time in a year, both of them cried, tears of pain, of forgiveness, and of love that had never truly died. "Welcome home, my son," Eleanor whispered. "Welcome home." Sometimes, the greatest gift a parent can give their child is to let them fall. Eleanor's love for Marcus was so deep that she was willing to break her own heart to save his soul. She taught him that respect cannot be bought, that love cannot be taken for granted, and that the hands that lift us deserve our honor, not our shame. Marcus had called his mother too ugly for his perfect wedding. But in the end, he learned that true beauty lies not in polished appearances, but in the scars we bear for love. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that we must never forget where we come from. The people who sacrifice for us, who work with their hands so we can reach for our dreams, they deserve our gratitude, not our shame. A mother's love is the greatest inheritance any child can receive, but it's only valuable if the child is wise enough to treasure it. What do you think? Did Eleanor do the right thing in cutting Marcus off, or was her response too harsh? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Until next time, remember, the hands that lift us up deserve our love, not our shame.